Tima is like one of the longest lasting Regnum Christi members in our locality in Ontario, and has basically run the whole show for a long time, you know. And well, now she doesn't have like an official position, right? Are you a team leader?
I'm a team leader.
She's a team leader of one of the women's teams. She does a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, like running the website and setting up all of the registrations and payments and stuff. So she helped a lot with this as well. So thank you, Tima, and please come share with us.
That's good. You can hear me if I don't hold the mic? I can multitask, but it's easier if I don't have to hold it. Father Pierre's not here for that little. He likes to remind us how he has trouble multitasking. Anyway, yep, so Father Adam already kind of gave you a little introduction. I joined Regnum Christi in 2000, and my husband will correct me, 2007?
Yep.
Yes, so we're going on like 18 years. And it's flown by, so it's even hard for me to believe that it's been that long. Married for 28 years. I have 4 boys. My youngest has been with us this morning, and my oldest is 25, soon to be 26, and I have a 22-year-old. My 12-year-old was here with us at Mass, and then he's gone home. And our family has always been involved ever since Dave and I joined. It started actually with our boys joining Conquest, and then Vacation Bible School, which at the time in our parish was run by Regnum Christi members. So that was our introduction. But today's talk, I'm not here to give you another testimony, though a bit of me will probably be in there if the Holy Spirit wants that. But I'm here to talk to you about, like Father mentioned, the spirituality, communion, and mission of Regnum Christi. So, yeah, that's just kind of the topics that I'm going to touch on. So the mystery that we make present, you're going to hear those 6 verbs again that you heard this morning. We're going to show it in a diagram. We're going to talk about the 3 aspects of the spirituality. We're going to talk about the 5 loves of Regnum Christi, how we're contemplative and evangelizing, how we make sense of time. No, I wish that's what I was going to. How we time manage. No, not so much, but we'll touch a bit on what that sense of time means in Regnum Christi. And then charity, which is a big one for me, that when I first felt called to Regnum Christi, that was probably one of the big things that stood out for me there. And then the 4 states of life in communion, which you've heard a bit about as well. And then the mission, and what it means to be a Regnum Christi apostle. You heard a bit this morning as well about how Regnum Christi is a fruit of that new evangelization. And I just wanted to touch on here, I was going to actually repeat those verbs again, which is, so to fulfill our mission, this comes out of that Statutes of Regnum Christi Federation. So to fulfill our mission, we seek to make present the mystery of Christ, who goes out to people, reveals the love of his heart to them, gathers them together, and forms them as apostles and Christian leaders, sends them out, and accompanies them as they collaborate in the evangelization of people and society. So I like to sum that up in the sense, and this is what I felt when I first joined Regnum Christi, it's like first he called me to come, and then he asked me to go. And that's exactly what it's like. Yes, come to me, come to know me, and then now go and bring others to do the same. So spirituality, and actually I'm going to skip to the next slide because I think that's where the diagram is. Yes, that's the one. So spirituality, communion, and mission. You see in this diagram how it's all kind of like, it intertwines, it's all together. And that other one, actually now I know what I want to say here, is it seems like it's in a list, right? Spirituality, first you got to know the spirituality, then you're called to the mission, and then you're in communion. There actually is no order. Okay, so today you may be feeling like actually it's communion because you're experiencing that here and you're like, this is beautiful, this is what's attracting me. Or maybe like in my case, when I first felt called to Regnum Christi, when I was like, oh, I think God is calling me to this, I felt like he was calling me to this because he wanted to send me out. That was really what I was like, come to me and then go. And so my first thing was like, oh, what pastas can I get involved in? And I'm a bit of a doer, as you probably know if you know me. So that was my attraction, was like, now I get to do something meaningful, something with purpose, not just something that is filling my time, but it's not actually bearing any fruit for eternity. It's just worldly things. So there's no order. That's what I wanted to say there. You could be feeling a different resonance with a different part of this, but the point is that in Regnum Christi, at some point, you're going to experience all three. You're going to see all three of these lived out among Regnum Christi members. So back to our diagram. So of course it's pretty clear, right? Spirituality is like, it's the spirit. It's our relationship with Christ. But then in communion, that's part of our nature. We want to live in relationship with others. So it's relationship with Christ, but also relationship with others. And we do this, and you're going to hear more about it, I think, in the next talk, but we do this also within the small teams, but then we also experience that communion when we come together as a larger team as well, like events like today, or Christ the King, or retreats, any events you've already experienced, you've seen that communion already. And then, so with that is, yes, we're growing our intimacy with Christ, and then it's kind of like it reciprocates. We grow closer to Christ, we feel that, he's the Lord of our life, and then he calls us out, even though we're different, we have different gifts, we come from different backgrounds, different traditions, but because of Christ, there's that unity. And in that unity, then, we're called to mission. And that really is part of forming apostles, so bringing other people to come to know Christ, to grow in their intimacy with him, to experience that communion among us, but also then to not only bring others to do that, but also to care for others. And that's what you hear when we talk about the youth going on missions, bringing food to the poor on the streets of Hamilton, or spending time with the elderly in nursing homes. Or I remember years ago for Holy Week, one of the missions we did was actually going door to door and inviting people to the Triduum celebrations and masses that were happening in the local church. So it was a church in Hamilton, St. Patrick's, we invited them. I can't remember which church it was, doesn't matter. The point is, we were going out and inviting them to come to the mass, to on the Easter Vigil or whatever was happening that weekend in the church. So it's going out and bringing others to come in and taking care of their spiritual, physical needs as well. I could have highlighted them for you nicely. Okay. So, yeah, no order, we talked about that, I'm sorry. Here we go, yeah, we're going to touch on the 5 loves of Regnum Christi. And one thing just to mention here is that the 5 loves of an RC member, really any good Catholic would have these 5 loves, right? So it's not like it's anything earth-shattering that we're sharing, but it's in how we live this out that maybe might look a little different. But I'm just going to go through them quickly here, and then we'll delve into each one a little deeper. So, love for Christ, love for all people, love for Regnum Christi, love for our Blessed Mother, love for the Church. And so our spirituality, really, we'll move on to the next one, is a Christ-centered spirituality. So it really is centered on our love for Christ. And it's born out of experiencing his love, right? So we have an encounter with Christ, and then we respond to that. And that's really what, if you talk to anyone in Regnum Christi and they share their story, at some point in their journey, it started with, it's an encounter with Christ. That's really where it begins. You've experienced Christ in a personal way, and with that experience now, there's just is the call to now give back, to serve, to bring others to come to know that same love that we know. And it really is an exercise of our free will, right? So he invites us, then we use our free will to respond to that invitation. And there are many movements, as Father Adam mentioned this morning. There are other movements. There are other movements that have other spiritualities, other ways of growing their relationship with Christ, of living their authentic Christian life through the spirituality of the movement that they've been called to. And I always, when I think about my own journey, my mom was involved in the charismatic movement. And as a youth, I went on charismatic retreats. And it cemented for me, yes, that the Holy Spirit is alive and well in the church. I had, after those weekends, I'm like, yep. But there was more that I was looking for. It wasn't something that was drawing me in to also be involved, like even though I saw the other youth there who were on fire, and I'm like, this is beautiful. But there was something more that I wanted, and I didn't find it there, and so I eventually kind of lost my way, and finding my way back was through Regnum Christi. And it's because of it was the formation aspect. It was those questions I had. This is where I found those answers. And so for me, it was kind of like, there's a reason why God put Regnum Christi in my path. I don't need to now go looking at all the other movements that are in the church. The charismatic movement serves a purpose, but Regnum Christi is really where I kind of found my footing, where I found home. Then our next, I don't think I'm ready to move on to that actually, but yeah, because I wanted to talk about our motto, which you heard this morning in our prayer, right? When we say, Christ our King.
Thy kingdom come.
Yes, because that's our desire, really. That's our, I don't want to say war cry, because we are in a bit of a battle, but it's our war cry. It is our desire really is to see Christ's kingdom come. And Christ's kingdom really is wherever God's will is being done, right? So when we're here together, when we're working in a mission, we're working on apostolate, we're bringing others to know Christ, that's what we want to see. We want to see his will being done, and so that's really what that means. And we start our day with that. And you're going to hear more about that later on, but that's the first prayer of the morning. Christ our King, thy kingdom come. And yes, of course, our love for Mary. So our Blessed Mother has been given to us, and I think at the foot of the cross. And we love her with this filial tenderness, right? And we're going to trust ourselves to her care. And, sorry, I wanted to just stay right here. Okay. One thing that comes to mind when I think about how Regnum Christi is, well, in many ways how being in RC has helped me grow in my love for Mother Mary. But one image that always struck me is Our Lady of Sorrows. So after they take Jesus down from the cross, and there's that image of her holding Jesus. There's some images where you see, and I think this is especially portrayed in the Passion of the Christ, where she's holding Jesus and then she has another hand that's kind of out. And I always feel like that other hand is her saying, what are you going to do now? So he did this for you. What are you going to do? And that's how it helps me. I'm not going to tear up now, but how I see Regnum Christi helps me to live that out in response to her call as well, is by bringing him to others, his love to others. And then, of course, our love for the church. Because we see the church as the seed, as the beginning of the kingdom on earth. Because that's where we would start to see God's will being done, right? We know that it's not perfect, but Christ started the church with imperfect people, and here we are. So we know that it can still be a witness of God's will being done on earth. So we collaborate with the local church to bring others. And that's why many of you have probably experienced the day retreats that we do in the different parishes. We've run missions. We've done a lot through the Missions, the Conquest and Challenge Clubs. We've run through the parishes. So we want to bring others to come to know and love Christ. And we do that by working with the local church as well. And then, of course, it's a love for all people. So we make our own attitude of Christ, who loved his own in the world and loved them to the end. So we recognize the dignity and the sacred value of each person, which is what would then make us, call to go out onto the streets, bring food to the poor, minister to them, ask them how we can pray for them. The same reason why we would go into the nursing homes and spend time with the elderly. The same reason that we would go on the March for Life or create boxes of hope or anything that we're doing is because we recognize the dignity of the other person, right? And then we seek to meet their material and spiritual needs, same examples, and collaborating with Christ so that our brothers and sisters can know and find their fullness in him and that they can also reach eternal salvation. And then our love for Regnum Christi. And that actually, for me, the best way of experiencing that is in communion with others. And I was just sharing with one of the young adults here that the moments that I've experienced that really like in a supernatural way, because I experienced it in my teams, experienced it on days like today, but when I've gone on events that are outside of Ontario, gone to a conference or convention or something, and in Atlanta actually was our first experience with thousands of families who were probably mostly Regnum Christi. We weren't yet when we first went. It was a youth and family encounter. But it doesn't matter if I'm there with what should feel like strangers. They feel like family, right? And it's like this love we have for Christ, this way that we live it out, the authenticity. I can keep adding more adjectives, but it's so clear. Even when we're among strangers, it feels somehow like we're among friends, like we're with family. And then we move on to contemplative and evangelizing. And we see this also lived out in our teams, but it's really about prayer in action. So yes, we're an apostolic movement. We're an apostolic church, right? Just by our very nature, Catholic Church is to be apostolic. So really, in Regnum Christi, yes, we want to hold events, we want to go out and do mission and all that, but it really is a fruit of prayer. That's where it starts. So if my prayer is really effective, then there's something that happens. I'm not just, God isn't calling me to pray and have a beautiful team where we read the gospel together and then just keep that all for myself and I'm a spiritual glutton, right? Oh, I just want it for me, it's all for me. That's not how this works, right? He's like, no, like I said, he calls you to come and then he asks you to go, right? And then we talk about the sense of time. So we understand that there's an eternal communion with God is desired, and that the outcome of every human life happens in the here and now, right? So today matters, right now matters. So to make Christ's kingdom present, we have to make good use of our time. That is part of it. And so I mentioned before how I like to be busy. Well, I was busy before Regnum Christi. Busy doing what? That's the question, right? So there's a song that our you saw the Regnum Christi Music Collective song was playing during the break. Consecrated women of Regnum Christi have also over the years put out their own music. And years ago, one of the songs that they had that really resonated with me is called One Life, One Chance. And the rest of the line is one life, one chance to make Christ's kingdom come. And if we're friends on WhatsApp, you've seen that motto in my, status line or whatever you call it. Because that really is the motivator. It's not that you only live once, like Michael mentioned earlier. It really is just that we've got right now. And if it's not now, then when? And if it's not you, then who, right? I know that's a cliche, but that really is how we talk about it. It's that sense of urgency, but that is also comes with a sense of peace. We know there's always going to be work to be done. We know there's always going to be more hearts that we need to bring Christ to. So we have this urgency, but we also have a sense of peace in that. And then this one I mentioned to you earlier, that charity being the queen of all virtues, right? Because it's love. Love is the greatest of the theological virtues. So embracing Christ's new commandments to love one another as I have loved you. Charity entails a universal and thoughtful self-giving to one's neighbor. It motivates us to have a creative and selfless service, treating other people with kindness and simplicity. And we work to maintain unity within the movement. Now, does this mean that we just paint smiles on our faces, even if we have to work with people that we don't like? Right? We're people. There's going to be personalities. Sometimes we run into things. It's in how we deal with those situations. That's the secret, right? And that's where, because we're in a family and we all have those same loves, that it's not about gossiping. It's not about creating cliques. It's about finding ways to work with each other. and about being able to go to someone and maybe it starts as venting, what could be gossiping, but because we care about each other's soul, we're going to quickly turn that around. And I'm going to tell you, I experienced that just today, okay? But my first experience with that, I think I was a new Regnum Christi member, and it was a family who are now in Atlanta, and they were in the video that we saw earlier. They were the friends of the family that was being highlighted in that video. And it was with them, they were over for our son's birthday, and with my own family and now some new Regnum Christi friends. So that was already kind of a dangerous thing to do, but we did it. But the conversations started to go a little sideways. And I was still in the beginning stages of this new relationship with Christ. So it was easy for me to just, I'm going to go into this conversation. And one of the RC members who was there, he turned that conversation around. I saw it. I knew what he was doing. And I was so grateful because it called me out in a charitable way. He didn't single me out. He just added a little humor to the conversation, but I knew what he was doing, and I thanked him after because it saved me from going into this gossipy conversation. And I have experienced that time and time again in Regnum Christi. I know that my brothers and sisters in Christ love me enough that they're not going to let me go there. They're going to bring me back. Let's reel it back in. So it really is, and for me, the reason I said this was a big one also is because initially when I heard this in the discernment, that charity is the queen of all virtues, I was like, yeah, you're not calling me here. There's no way. Anybody knows me, my husband, my kids, Michael's my nephew, maybe he knows too, but it's like, I can be blunt, I can tell you like it is. So the fact that God would call me to a movement where charity is the queen of all virtues, I was like, really? But it's because he's like, yeah, we're going to work on that. This is how. And we talked a lot about communion already. And there's that wonderful image again of the apostles. Because again, it is the same way that Christ worked when he first started working with his apostles. It's the same thing that he does with us, right? It's the small teams, and then they go out and they come back and get formed and renewed again with him, and then they're sent out again, right? Like this is what he does with us. And it's that same idea of how that burning love that we have in our hearts, we want to bring it to others, and we see it in others as well, who are already share that same spirituality. And that's why sometimes, even with someone who's not RC yet, but is feeling that pull, so you meet someone who is Regnum Christi, and there's a connection. There's something there. You can't really put your finger on it. And I remember experiencing that as well. And that's what it is. It's because there's a communion. There's like, we're family. There's something here that resonates that's the same. And it's those 6 verbs again, right? Where he goes out, he calls us, reveals his love, gathers us, and then sends us out. And being in Regnum Christi, and it's not really something that is like a hat that I wear, right? It's something that it's a way of life, and you've heard a bit of that today already. And Christ could accomplish what he came to do on his own. He didn't need his apostles, right? He could have done it on his own. And interesting thing, we're watching the Chosen right now with our younger ones. And we keep seeing how even in the Chosen, they're setting it up where we could say, see, Jesus would still have gone through his passion and death without Judas. He didn't need Judas to betray him. Right? And that's why there's always, we can see it in the Chosen so well, this hope that maybe he won't go through with it. Because he didn't have to. They find him. They know where he is. They could easily have found him without him. But the opposite is also true then. He could also call people to come to know and love him without his apostles. But he doesn't do it alone. He does it in communion. And so the same way that we're called to do this in communion with others. And sometimes, frankly, it might even be easier to do it on our own, right? Sometimes, like, I can just do everything myself. I'll know it, and that's my pride that will kick in there. But I can do it all by myself. I don't need other people or to wait for someone else to do part of it. I can just move ahead and do it. But that's not what he's calling us to do. Give other people opportunities to serve. Yeah, because then that's where we get to practice that charity that I just talked about, right? If I didn't have to work with others, I don't have to practice charity, because I just do it by myself. But then I'm not giving others the opportunity to serve, but I'm also not giving myself an opportunity to grow in that unity and charity that is so important to my own spiritual growth and my own growth as a person, all these things that God actually cares about for me. And then it happens in our different states of life, and that's the next part that we're going to talk about now. It has to do with the 4 states of life. So you've heard about how the branches, we have the Legionaries of Christ, we have the consecrated women, consecrated men, which I think I've only met 1 or 2 in all my 18 years of being an RC member. So there aren't too many of them, I don't think, but and then, or maybe they just haven't come through Ontario very often. And then there's the lay people, the laity who, and we all work together to bring Christ to others. And we do it how? So if I'm married and I've got 4 children, and it's like, well, I didn't just say, okay, well, forget my vocation as a wife and mom, because now I gotta be a Regnum Christi apostle, right? I live it through my state of life. That means that I'm called to be a Regnum Christi apostle even as a wife and a mom and as someone who's working full time. And then even in my work. So it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's a way of life. So even with the people I work with, I'm blessed to work with people who are all Christian. I'm the only Catholic on the team. But I don't often feel left out because it's the same love for Christ, right? So, and they see it too. And then I have one of them who said to me once, you know, my husband's Catholic, but he's not Catholic like you're Catholic. Like, I need to talk to him. And then, of course, we're touching on this sense of mission. So an apostle of the kingdom, like what does that mean? So it means that we're a person who's involved in that mystery of Christ. So when Christ comes to reveal the love of his heart, the mystery, we are then also in collaboration with him, bringing that to others. So there's nothing in my life that I'm engaged in that isn't touched by Christ. And I kind of explained that already. It's not a hat I wear, it literally is a way of life. And so to fulfill that mission, just make sure so you have an opportunity to see all that there. To do that, he forms me as an apostle, as a Christian leader, and he sends me out to then bring others to do the same. And then you're hearing that again and again. And I hope you're hearing it again and again. Because the thing is, sometimes we need to hear things again. Maybe the first time it wasn't, so if I sound like I'm repeating myself, one thing I was told once in preparing for presentations is that when you're tired of saying it, they're just hearing it. Your audience is just hearing it. So, one thing I'm going to mention before I move on to the video, because I think we have a video for you to watch as well, that introduces the 5 elements of Regnum Christi, which you've seen behind us all day here. So you have a video that kind of goes in and explains that a bit more. But I just wanted to mention one thing about the Regnum Christi youth, because I have 4 boys and they've gone through Conquest and Challenge, and then with that comes ECYD. I don't know if you're going to hear too much about ECYD today, but I wasn't introduced to Regnum Christi that way. I came in as an adult. So at one of the conventions that I went to, we got to hear from the Regnum Christi youth, which is what ECYD is. It's Regnum Christi youth. And that's how they explained it to us. Until someone from ECYD went up and they said, actually, I think that Regnum Christi is ECYD for adults. And that's awesome. So that's the love that we all share in Regnum Christi. Really, if you've been through it and you've experienced it as a youth, it's that same, like they have the same energy and love for Christ as a youth, and then bringing that into the adult sections. I was like, this is really awesome. So I can't wait until we have more of that here, because ECYD is kind of just in the last couple of years, we've seen kind of an explosion of the youth section here in Ontario. So I'm looking forward to being able to have someone in our section say, Regnum Christi is actually, ECYD for adults.
Father Jarek says it all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Tima. Thank you, Tima.
Thank you, Father. I think I was one of the people who, when Father referred to the testimonies this morning, was voluntold to come up here and give a testimony. So, no, it's great to be up here. I really look forward to what I'm going to say to you guys, and I think it's really good to be here in Ontario with this Regnum Christi family. I'll just start off by saying that it's been truly a blessing that I've got to experience for the last 2 months or so. So. Before I get too much into that, though, I'm gonna give a little backstory to how I got to be here. So, I grew up in small town Nova Scotia. I was, like Marta said, I was a cradle Catholic. Like she used that term in her testimony, where I grew up always attending mass. I went to a Catholic school, received the sacraments frequently, but never really had any deeper meaning than that to me. Like I was told that like God loved me, all that jazz, but it never really hit home until I was probably about 17 years old, and I was invited to go on a retreat a couple hours away from where I grew up, and I begrudgingly I was being hounded by the guy that was putting on the retreat and my mom. Basically, they were like, yeah, you should go, it'll be really fun. I'm like, no. No, it's a Jesus thing. Like I'm not gonna know anyone there. No one is really gonna figure out, like, there's gonna be no one that I connect with. Like, it was actually a retreat for university students, and I was just graduated high school at this time.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think that's Tima's cut off to tell her to stop talking, so that's okay. So I was at this retreat where I first experienced like real authentic Catholic community for the first time. I know a lot of people, the people who've spoken so far, and a lot of what Regnum Christi is a Catholic community. So a lot of what attracts people is that community aspect where you get to live out your faith with the group, not just by yourself. It's not a big daunting thing. It's something that actually helps you to grow, and that's something that you can really experience the feeling of being loved when you're in a community. So it was at this retreat where I got to, through the talks, a night of adoration and a really, really powerful confession. Probably my first authentic confession in over like 4 years. I just really, I remember walking into that confessional with the biggest like smile and like tears of joy on my face, and just knowing that God loved me for like the first time in my life, and knowing that I was finally somewhere where I belonged in a Catholic community, and that I wanted to keep this feeling for like the rest of my life. And so that started the journey. That was, over 2 years ago now. And I went from there, and I was like on fire. Someone mentioned it earlier, where it's like it's the quote from Corinthians: "The love of Christ impels us." Like you would get this encounter with Jesus, with His mercy, with His grace, with His love, and then you want to take that and spread that forth to the world. But I didn't know how to do that. So like I went home to my small town, like 2 hours away from this great community that I just found, and I was like really happy, like on this great retreat high, and then it was like, okay, now what? So like for the next year, like I kept connecting with that community very, sporadically though. So I was still like missing that element of what I really needed to be fully living out my mission as a Catholic, of taking that love of Christ and spreading it to the world. So I was so like connected in love with that community up in Halifax that when I heard the retreat was happening again the following September, I signed up, I went, I had another great experience, and now I really got to know people. I connected with the community a lot more. I was invited to come to a conference with this group. This group is called CCO. It's a university movement here in Canada, So I went to their national conference in Ottawa this past New Year's called Rise Up. And it was there where I was at a time where like I've had this like conviction inside of me of that I'm loved and I have to take this out to the world. And I was really heavily discerning like what I was going to do with that. I was an 18-year-old guy. I was like, do I go to school? Do I live out my vocation that way? Do I like enter the workforce? Do I enter the priesthood? Like where does God want me to go? And I really felt that God was calling me to live out that mission of spreading the light, spreading the gospel to, in some way, some very direct way, like as a missionary. So I knew had this like conviction of being called as a missionary, but I didn't know where I was going to live that out. So I entered this conference back over the New Year, and it was there where they actually had like booths like set up all around the conference of like different like missionary movements. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly what I needed. So I was going around the booth, and all of a sudden I stumble into this one that says Regnum Christi, and I was like, okay, wow. I was like, I think that exact banner is what caught my eye. Actually, it was the same one, so that's pretty crazy. And I started talking to Father Adam was there, and I actually I saw one of their pamphlets they had out on the table. I was like, hey, wait a minute, I know that guy. And so that guy on the pamphlet was actually my uncle. So my uncle, so like I've known, this is a little bit more backstory. I've known about Regnum Christi for a long time, but never like what they did, never really had any effect on me growing up. But my uncle is one of like the very, very few consecrated men. The elusive consecrated man that Tina talked about. My uncle is one of like the 4 consecrated men in all of like Canada and the US. So if you ever run into him, it's a rare sight because he's spread out. So yeah, I was like, hey, that's him. So I started talking to Father Adam more, and over the course of the 4 days of the conference, I really got to know Father Adam well, and he signed up. We agreed that he would become my spiritual director. And so it was through that I started like talking to him, started really like sharing for the first time like what I thought I was being called to as wanting to be a missionary. And I was really stuck between a few different programs, and he informed me about this Regnum Christi missionary program for guys that were like kind of recently out of high school, and I was like, it literally fit like every need that I had. It had the community that I so like desperately needed and wanted, and that was what had like initiated my conversion. It had like the spiritual life, the formation. Like this is like the only missionary program that I know of where you can spend the whole year living with priests, and like it doesn't get much better than that, especially when those priests are legionaries. So I'm incredibly lucky to get to live with the fathers here in Oakville, and yeah, so it was through Father Adam and through spiritual direction, like Michael talked about earlier. You dip your toe in the water, and then you do something that really helps you to fully immerse yourself, and that was the spiritual direction for me. And I applied to the missionary program. I became accepted. I went through the formation course in the summer, and that was really where I got to experience what living in like a Regnum Christi family was like for the first time. And what I quickly realized was that it's crazy. Like I have my uncle who's Regnum Christi. I also have an aunt who's a consecrated woman, and I was like, it's just like I'm talking to them. Like these people could be my cousins or my aunt and uncle that I was living with down in Indiana during our summer course. So it's like that spiritual family that you find kind of wherever you go in the world. Like Regnum Christi, I don't know if most people probably know this, but it's global. Like it's all over, and you can kind of when you have something like that where you're all united by this one charism of wanting to seeking Christ and to establish His kingdom and going out. It's that contemplative, that prayer life that I'm being formed with right now and formed with in the past that really kind of caught my eye during that summer course. And I was like, if I'm already doing this, if I'm already like all in on the prayer life, on being a missionary, and I'm obviously like at the point now where I'm about to be sent out into the world to be a missionary apostle. It was a no-brainer at that point that when it was offered to us at the end of the summer course that I would associate and join Regnum Christi. So at the very end of our training period back in August was when I was able to have my association, and I joined Regnum Christi. So I'm probably the youngest Regnum Christi member in this room as far as time with Regnum Christi, but I felt so alive ever since I was able to make that that commitment, that where I actually became a member. I received so much since then. Coming out, yeah, it's been so great coming here to Oakville, to Ontario. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. The Regnum Christi. Once I got here, like I realized that it wasn't just something that I could live out kind of in my heart, but I could actually like implant that in other people's hearts. And that's something that we really get to do when we go out on mission. We do the mission youth program. It's so awesome. It's so good to be like the hands and feet of Christ going out to the world. And that's kind of like, if you have any reservations, I know a lot of you are here because you are discerning. It's that there's, ever since joining, like, yeah, there's that kind of like fear of commitment of what am I getting into? Like, is it gonna be difficult? Is it gonna be something that takes away from kind of like my personal life? But everything that I've received from Regnum Christi has only fed into that. I've made new friends. It's a family. Like you get so much, and it's just such a privilege to be like an active missionary and being the hands and feet of Christ. That's what you get when you become a Regnum Christi member. Like you get to live out being the hands and feet of Christ. So just kind of think about that as we go throughout the day, and that is, it's not something that's going to take away. It's going to be something that's so life-giving.